The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened at dark 30, which should have been everyone's first clue that this wasn't going to be your typical humans did something weird again briefing. Council Speaker Carix floated behind the podium, all four of his eye stalks twitching with what could charitably be called barely contained panic. "Esteemed delegates," Creeks began, his voice carrying that particular tremor reserved for really, really bad news. "We need to discuss the human situation, again." A collective groan rippled through the assembly. The Zolonian representative actually face-palmed, which was impressive considering Zolonians didn't technically have faces. I know, Crix continued, raising his tentacles for silence. "But this time it's different. This time, one of our own decided to test the waters. Literally, hunt a human. For sport." In the back row, Zektor of the Vorthak Dominion straightened in his seat, his razor-sharp mandibles clicking with anticipation. Finally, someone with some sense was going to settle this ridiculous human hysteria once and for all. The Vorthak were apex predators from a death world, where the weather tried to kill you and the plants had developed a taste for meat. Humans were just soft, slow mammals from a garden world with barely any natural defenses. "Now, before we hear Zektor's report," Crick said, his eye stalks swiveling to pin the Vorthak with their collective gaze, "let me remind everyone of our standing advisory regarding human contact. Do not engage humans in combat. Do not attempt to intimidate humans. Do not, under any circumstances, try to hunt humans for any reason whatsoever." Zektor's mandibles clicked dismissively. "With respect, Council Speaker, those advisories were written by cowards. The Vorthak have studied these humans extensively. They're persistence hunters at best, pack animals with delusions of grandeur. They don't even have proper claws or fangs. How dangerous could they possibly be?" The entire council chamber fell silent. Even the translator systems seemed to hiccup. "Zektor," Crick said slowly, "please tell me you didn't actually—" "Oh, I absolutely did." Zektor's chitinous armor gleamed as he stood, radiating the confidence of someone who had never met a human and was about to learn why that was probably for the best. "I tracked one to a remote location on their planet, alone, isolated, perfect hunting conditions. I was going to bring back proof that humans are nothing more than oversized prey animals with an inflated reputation." The Zolonian representative made a sound like air being let out of a balloon. The crystalline delegate began to shimmer rapidly, which in their species indicated either extreme amusement or complete terror. Given the circumstances, it was probably both. "And?" Crix asked, though from his tone he clearly didn't want to hear the answer. Zektor's mandibles stopped clicking, his 6 eyes dimmed slightly. "Well," he said, and for the first time since anyone had known him, the apex predator of Vorthak Prime sounded just a little bit uncertain. That's where things got complicated." "I had done my research," Zektor continued, his voice taking on that particular tone reserved for recounting events that had seemed like a good idea at the time. "Human camping behaviors, sleep cycles, isolated locations. I found the perfect target. A lone male, species designation Marcus, engaged in what humans call getting away from it all in their wilderness areas." The council leaned forward collectively. Even the hive mind delegate stopped its constant buzzing. The human had set up a primitive shelter made of synthetic materials in a forest clearing. No weapons visible, no armor, no defensive positions. He was completely vulnerable. Zektor paused, his mandibles twitching. "I waited until the deepest part of their night cycle, when humans are supposedly at their most helpless. Everything was perfect." "Define perfect," Crick said, though he sounded like he was already regretting asking. "I approached using full stealth protocols. My cloaking field was active, my footsteps silent, my scent masked. I positioned myself directly outside his shelter and deactivated my cloak for maximum psychological impact. Then I deployed my full intimidation display. Mandibles extended, claws unsheathed, battle roar at 100% volume." Several council members winced. The Vorthak battle roar was legendary for its ability to paralyze prey with terror. I announced my presence with the traditional hunting challenge. "Weak human, your time has come. Face me, and no fear before you die," or something along those lines. The translation protocols might have added some dramatic flair. "And the human's response?" Crix asked, though he was starting to sound like he already knew this wasn't going to go well. Zektor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He sat up in his sleeping arrangement, slowly, made a sound I later learned was called yawning. Then he looked at me, rubbed his eyes with his knuckles and said, and I quote, "Dude, it's like 3 in the morning. Do you need help or something? The silence in the council chamber was so complete you could have heard a pin drop, assuming pins made noise when they dropped in vacuum. He asked if you needed help, Crix repeated flatly. That's not even the worst part, Zektor continued, his voice taking on a slightly hysterical edge. When I maintained my intimidation stance and repeated my challenge, he just kept looking at me, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Then he said, "Are you hungry? Because I've got some trail mix if you want some. It's the good kind with the chocolate pieces." The crystalline delegates shimmering intensified to the point where it was actually starting to hurt to look at them directly. "Trail mix," QF said. "Trail mix," Zektor confirmed miserably. He offered a 7-foot-tall apex predator with active claws and fangs trail mix at 3 in the morning, like it was the most normal thing in the universe. And then he asked if I was lost. "Lost," Zektor repeated, his voice hollow with the memory. This human, faced with a creature that could literally tear him limb from limb, asked if I needed directions. He started looking around his campsite like he was trying to remember where he'd put a map. Council Speaker Crix made a note on his datapad, probably something along the lines of, "Update human threat assessment to include weaponized helpfulness." "I decided to escalate," Zektor continued. "Clearly my initial approach wasn't registering as the mortal threat it was supposed to be, so I moved closer, lowered my voice to its most menacing register, and explained in detail exactly what I was going to do to him. The traditional Vorthak death threats, you understand. Very specific, very graphic, very thorough. And he listened to the whole thing, nodding along like I was giving him hiking directions. When I finished, he scratched his head and said, "Okay, but why though? Did someone send you? Because that seems like a lot of effort for not much payoff, you know?" The hive mind delegate started making a sound that might have been laughter, if hive minds could laugh, which apparently they could. Who knew? "He wanted to know my motivation," Zektor said, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what was definitely stress. "He asked if this was some kind of cultural thing he should be aware of. Then he apologized. He actually apologized to me for not understanding my cultural practices better." "That's when you killed him, right?" asked the Zolonian representative hopefully. "Please tell me that's when you killed him." "That's when he offered me coffee." The council chamber erupted. Delegates were chittering, buzzing, shimmering, and making various other species-appropriate sounds of disbelief. Crix had to bang his gavel 17 times to restore order. "Coffee," Crix said, once the noise died down. "Coffee," Zekot confirmed. He said, and again I quote, "Look, I don't know what your deal is, but you seem really worked up about something. Why don't you sit down, and I'll make some coffee. It's the good stuff, not that instant garbage. We can talk this through, like civilized beings." "Did you explain that you weren't civilized? That you were an apex predator here to end his pathetic existence?" "I tried." He said that was fine, everyone had bad days, and asked if I took cream or sugar. Zektor's voice was getting higher. He started rummaging around in his supplies, muttering about proper hospitality and how his mother would be horrified if she knew he wasn't being a good host to a visitor. "A visitor?" Crix repeated. "That's what he called me, a visitor. He said I must have traveled a long way to get there and the least he could do was offer refreshments." Zektor paused, his mandibles drooping. Then he asked about my journey. He wanted to know if I had trouble with traffic, if the weather was nice, if I needed to use his phone to call anyone and let them know I'd arrived safely. The crystalline delegate was now shimmering so rapidly they were practically strobing. Several other delegates had started making their species equivalent of whimpering sounds. "That's when I made my tactical error," Zektor continued. "I told him I didn't need his phone because I was going to kill him and then eat his corpse as a trophy. Finally, some proper predator behavior," the Zolonian said approvingly. He asked if I had any dietary restrictions. The approval died instantly. "Dietary restrictions," Zektor said miserably. He said he understood that different species had different nutritional needs, and he wanted to make sure he wouldn't cause me any digestive issues. He asked if I was lactose intolerant. He offered to check the ingredient labels on his food supplies to make sure nothing would give me an allergic reaction. "This is getting worse," Crix muttered, making more notes. Then he asked if I wanted him to cook himself first, because he'd read that some predator species preferred their food prepared, and he had a really nice camp stove that would do the job properly. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that usually preceded either enlightenment or complete psychological breakdown. "He offered," Carice said slowly, "to cook himself. For you. To make sure you had a proper meal." With seasoning, Zektor added helplessly. He said he had some really good herbs and spices, and it would be a shame to waste good meat on poor preparation. That's when the real horror began to dawn on the council. This wasn't just a human being weird. This was a human being helpful. And there was nothing in the known universe more dangerous than a helpful human with access to proper supplies. That should have been the end of it, Zektor continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone recounting a recurring nightmare. I should have just killed him then and there, but I was curious. How could a species this aggressively helpful have survived long enough to develop space travel? So, I decided to observe a little longer. Q-Krig's eye stalks drooped. Oh no. The human, Marcus, started moving around his campsite with what I can only describe as purposeful efficiency. He fired up some kind of heating device and began preparing the coffee he'd promised. While it was brewing, he pulled out a communications device and made a call. To authorities. Military. Some kind of human death squad? The Zolonian asked hopefully. Hostility to his friend Dave. The council collectively groaned. The conversation went like this, Zektor said, his voice taking on an unnaturally high pitch as he mimicked human speech patterns. Hey Dave, sorry to wake you up, but I've got a situation here. Yeah, I'm at the campsite. There's this, well, he's kind of like a really big bug person, except more lizardy. He's got a lot of teeth. No, he's not attacking or anything. He says he's here to kill and eat me, but honestly I think he might just be really hungry and doesn't know how to ask for help properly. Several delegates began making their species equivalent of hyperventilating sounds. Then Marcus put his hand over the phone and asked me, hey, what do you actually eat normally? Like, what's your regular diet? When I told him we consume the flesh of our conquered enemies, he nodded thoughtfully and got back on the phone. Dave, do we have any of that venison left from your hunting trip? The guy's a carnivore. Big-time carnivore. The human called reinforcements, Crick said weakly. The human called his friend to discuss catering options, Zektor corrected. Dave apparently told him he'd be right over with supplies. Marcus thanked him, hung up, and then poured me a cup of coffee. In a ceramic mug, with little pictures of trees on it. You drank it, the crystalline delegate managed to say through their strobing. I drank it, Zektor confirmed miserably. It was really good coffee. Marcus asked if I wanted to sit down while we waited for Dave. He had folding chairs. He insisted I take the one with the cup holder. The hive mind delegate's buzzing was reaching frequencies that were starting to interfere with the translation systems. That's when Dave arrived, Zektor continued. I heard the sound of an approaching vehicle and I thought, finally, this is where the human pack hunting behavior kicks in. This is where they show their true nature. And Dave got out of his vehicle carrying the largest portable cooling unit I have ever seen. He took one look at me, said, Holy crap, Marcus, you weren't kidding about the teeth, and then asked if I needed help unloading the cooler. He wanted you to help with supplies, Crick said faintly. Dave had brought enough food for a small army. Apparently when Marcus said I was a carnivore, Dave interpreted that as a logistical challenge to be solved. He had steaks, hamburgers, hot dogs, something called bratwurst, and 3 different types of what they call deli meat. He also brought a portable cooking surface, extra chairs, a folding table, paper plates, napkins, and condiments. Condiments, the Zolonian repeated. So many condiments, Zektor said, his eyes going distant. Mustard, ketchup, something called steak sauce, 3 different types of hot sauce ranging from mild to this will melt your face off, and a substance called ranch dressing that Dave claimed went with everything. I were planning a feast, Crick said, scribbling frantically on his data pad. Dave looked at Marcus and said, Did you ask him about sides? Because I brought potato salad, but I don't know if his species does carbs. Then they both looked at me expectantly, like this was a completely normal conversation to have with someone who had just threatened to murder and devour one of them. What did you tell them? I told them the Vorthak don't typically consume plant matter. Dave nodded like this was useful information and said, Cool, more potato salad for us then. Then he asked if I had any allergies he should know about before he fired up the grill. The grill? David brought a portable cooking device that he called the Good Grill. Apparently, his regular grill wasn't suitable for entertaining guests. He spent 10 minutes explaining the difference between propane and charcoal cooking while he set it up, asking for my opinion on flavor profiles and heat distribution. Zektor paused, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Then Marcus asked if I wanted to help with food prep. He said it would be more fun if everyone participated, and that cooking together was a great way to build friendships across cultural boundaries. You helped them prepare the food you were supposedly going to kill them for, Crick said. I found myself holding a plate while Dave explained the proper technique for seasoning meat. He had very strong opinions about salt distribution and the importance of letting steaks come to room temperature before cooking. Marcus was setting up the table and chairs, humming some kind of human music, occasionally asking me questions about Vorthak culture, like we were old friends catching up. And then more humans arrived. How did you— Yes, more humans arrived. Apparently Dave had texted some other people about the awesome cultural exchange opportunity happening at Marcus's campsite. 3 more vehicles showed up, carrying humans with more food, more equipment, and an intense curiosity about alien biology. The council chamber had gone completely silent except for the sound of Crick's frantically scribbling notes. That's when I realized, Zektor said quietly, that I wasn't the predator anymore. I was the guest of honor at an impromptu dinner party, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it. The humans had formed what I can only describe as a hospitality perimeter around me, Zektor continued, his voice taking on the hollow tone of someone who had seen things that would haunt his nightmares forever. I was sitting in a folding chair with a cup holder, holding a plate of perfectly grilled meat, surrounded by 6 humans who were all asking me questions at the same time. The council leaned forward, morbidly fascinated despite themselves. It started, innocently enough. Dave wanted to know about Vorthok cooking methods. A human female named Jenny asked about our family structures. Someone called Mike was intensely curious about our home planet's gravity and atmospheric composition. But then, Zektor's mandibles began clicking rapidly again. Then they started getting personal. Personal how? Crix asked, though he was clearly dreading the answer. Marcus asked if I had a family back home. When I mentioned that Vorthak males typically have multiple mates, Jenny got very excited and started asking about our mating rituals. She said she was studying anthropology, and this was absolutely fascinating from a sociological perspective. The Zolonian delegate made a sound like a deflating balloon. They were studying you. It gets worse, Zektor said. Mike turned out to be some kind of engineer. He started asking extremely detailed questions about my ship's propulsion system. He wanted to know about fuel efficiency, FTL mechanics, and whether I'd considered hybrid alternatives for atmospheric flight. When I told him our ships run on antimatter, he got this gleam in his eyes and started sketching diagrams on napkins. Eric said weakly, "Amy, we're reverse engineering your technology." Dave asked if I wanted seconds, Zektor continued, ignoring the interruption. Apparently I had eaten 3 steaks without realizing it. The humans took this as a sign that I was finally relaxing and feeling comfortable. Jenny started taking pictures. She said she was documenting first contact protocols for her research, but she also asked if I wanted copies for my own records. Photographs, the crystalline delegate managed to say through their increasingly frantic shimmering. They were creating evidence. Marcus asked if I had any dietary supplements I needed to take with my meals. When I explained that Vortak digestive systems are extremely efficient and don't require additional nutrients, he started asking about our medical systems. Before I knew it, I was explaining Vortak regenerative capabilities and average lifespan. Zektor paused, his 6 eyes dimming with the memory. That's when they started making plans. Plans? Jenny said she knew someone at the local university who would be absolutely thrilled to meet me. Mike wanted to introduce me to his buddy, who worked for something called NASA. Dave asked if I'd ever been to a proper barbecue restaurant, because there was this place about an hour away that did the most amazing brisket and he was sure I'd love it. The council chamber was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. Marcus asked if I was planning to stay in the area for a while because his mom was visiting next weekend and she'd be heartbroken if she missed meeting me. Apparently she collects stories about interesting people she's met and I would definitely qualify. They were integrating you, Crick said, his voice barely above a whisper, into their social structure. Jenny asked about Vorthak holidays and whether we had any coming up that they should know about. She said they'd love to help me celebrate properly, and she was sure they could find appropriate food and decorations. Mike wanted to know if there were any Vorthak games or sports they could learn. Zektora's voice dropped even lower. Dave asked if I had any allergies to pollen, because spring was coming and he wanted to make sure I'd be comfortable if I decided to visit again. Visit again, the hive mind delegate buzzed faintly. They assumed I was coming back, Zektor said. They started making a schedule. Marcus offered to teach me fishing. Jenny wanted to show me the local historical sites. Mike had a whole list of engineering projects he thought I might find interesting. Dave invited me to his daughter's birthday party. His daughter's birthday party, Crix repeated numbly. She's turning 7. Zektor said. He said she loves dinosaurs and would think I was the coolest thing ever. He asked if Vortak were good with children because he could be a little shy at first, but she warmed up quickly. The silence stretched on until the crystalline delegate finally managed to ask, "What did you tell them?" "I told them I had to go," Zektor said. "I said my ship had limited life support and I needed to return to orbit. They accepted this immediately and started packing me a care package for the journey. Leftover steak, some of Dave's famous potato salad, a thermos of Marcus's good coffee, and a container of Jenny's homemade cookies that she'd apparently brought in her vehicle just in case. They sent you home with leftovers," the Zalonian said. "Mike gave me his contact information in case I had any technical problems with my ship. Jenny asked me to send pictures of my home planet so she could show her students what a real alien world looked like. Dave made me promise to call if I ever needed anything at all." Zektor's mandibles drooped completely. "Marcus walked me back to my ship. He thanked me for a lovely evening and said I was welcome any time. He gave me a mug. A mug. A ceramic mug with "World's Best Alien Friend" printed on the side in what I later learned were several Earth languages. He said he'd had it custom made while we were talking, using some kind of rapid fabrication service on his communication device. The council chamber remained silent as the full horror of what they were hearing sank in. As my ship lifted off, Zektor concluded, I could see them waving from the clearing. Dave was already cleaning the grill. Marcus was packing up the extra chairs, and I realized that somewhere during the evening I had stopped being a predator and started being, he paused, struggling with the concept, a friend. "A friend," Crix said flatly. Zektor held up the mug. "I brought evidence." The ceramic mug caught the chamber's artificial lighting, its cheerful message glinting mockingly at the assembled delegates. Council Speaker Kirix stared at it with the expression of someone watching their entire worldview crumble into tiny, manageable pieces. "You brought a souvenir," Crix said slowly, "from your own failed assassination attempt." "It's ceramic," Zektor said defensively. "High-quality ceramic. Marcus said it was dishwasher safe and microwave compatible, whatever those mean. He also said the printing was guaranteed not to fade for at least 10 years. The hive mind delegates' buzzing had reached a pitch that was starting to affect nearby electronics. Several datapads began malfunctioning. "There's more," Zektor continued, reaching into what appeared to be a travel bag that definitely hadn't been there when he'd started his report. "They sent care packages." He began unpacking items with the careful reverence of someone handling religious artifacts. "This is Dave's potato salad. He included the recipe because he thought my family might enjoy it. This is Jenny's homemade cookies, also with recipe. She said she used a traditional Earth recipe that had been passed down through her family for generations." "You brought human food," the crystalline delegate managed through their strobing, "to the Galactic Council chambers." "Marcus insisted," Zektor said, pulling out a thermos that looked suspiciously well made. "He said the coffee would stay hot for up to 8 hours in this container, and he wanted to make sure I had something good to drink on the journey home. He also included extra coffee grounds and detailed brewing instructions." The Zalonian representative was making soft, whimpering sounds. "The humans fed you. They literally fed a predator, who came to kill them and sent you home with packed lunches. Mike included technical specifications for improving antimatter fuel efficiency," Zektor continued, producing a datapad that was definitely not of Vorthok manufacture. "He said he'd been thinking about our conversation and had some ideas that might help with my ship's performance. He also asked me to review his calculations and let him know if he'd made any errors in his assumptions about our technology." "They're recruiting you," Crix said with dawning horror. "They turned a hunting expedition into a recruitment opportunity. Jenny sent academic papers about comparative xenosociology and asked if I'd be willing to participate in a cultural exchange program between Earth and Vorthak Prime," Zektor said, his voice taking on an almost dreamy quality. "She said there were funding opportunities available, and she thought it would be mutually beneficial for both species." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Crix frantically updating his notes and the increasingly concerning electronic interference from the hive mind delegate. "Dave texted me," Zektor announced. "Texted you," Crix repeated. "It's a form of digital communication, very efficient. He wanted to make sure I got home safely and asked if the potato salad had traveled well. He also sent pictures of the barbecue restaurant he mentioned, along with their menu and hours of operation." Zektor's mandibles actually began to perk up slightly. "The brisket does look exceptional." "You're considering it," the Zalonian said in horror. You're actually considering going back. Marcus sent me a message too, Zektor continued, apparently not hearing the accusation. He said his mother was very excited to hear about our meeting and wanted to know if I had any dietary restrictions she should be aware of when she cooks dinner next weekend. She's apparently making something called pot roast and wanted to make sure I could enjoy it. Next weekend, Karik said faintly. I haven't responded yet, Zektor said quickly. I came here first to file my report, but… He paused, looking down at the mug in his hands. Jenny did ask some very interesting questions about Vorthak's social structures, and Mike's fuel efficiency ideas are actually quite innovative. Dave's barbecue restaurant has a 4-star rating on something called Yelp. You're going back, the crystalline delegate managed to say. Marcus's mother is making pot roast, Zektor said, as if this explained everything. She's including Yorkshire pudding. Dave says it's her specialty. Council Speaker Kurak set down his stylus and looked out at the assembled delegates with the weary expression of someone who had just realized that everything they thought they knew about the universe was wrong. Let the record show, he said slowly, that as of this date humans are to be classified as a class Omega species, not because of their military capabilities, their technology, or their territorial expansion, but because they represent the single greatest threat to the established order of predator-prey relationships in the known galaxy. He paused, watching Zektor carefully pack away his care packages. They made it somehow their way. They don't conquer through force, they don't dominate through fear, they adopt you, they make you part of their pack through relentless hospitality and genuine interest in your well-being. And by the time you realize what's happened, you're sitting in their kitchen, eating homemade cookies and calling them by their first names. The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. The new protocol regarding human contact is as follows, Crix continued. Do not engage humans under any circumstances. Do not accept their food. Do not answer their questions. Do not, under any circumstances, allow them to offer you coffee or ask about your family. And if a human asks if you need anything at all, retreat immediately and do not look back. What about Zektor? The Zenlian asked. Kurix looked at the Vorthok, who was now scrolling through what appeared to be human social media on Mike's gifted datapad, occasionally making please clicking sounds at pictures of food. Zektor is no longer a Vorthak warrior, Crick said sadly. He's been adopted. There's no coming back from that. I'm learning to cook, Zektor announced cheerfully, looking up from the device. Dave sent me a tutorial video about proper grilling techniques. Apparently I've been doing it all wrong. The council session was officially adjourned after the hive mind delegates' buzzing reached frequencies that caused 3 separate fire alarms to activate simultaneously, but the real damage was already done. Word spread quickly through the galactic community. Earth wasn't just inhabited by dangerous predators, it was inhabited by something far worse. Humans. And they were very, very friendly. The mug sat on Zektor's desk for the rest of his career, a ceramic reminder that sometimes the most terrifying predator in the universe is the one who offers you a home-cooked meal and genuinely means it.